we know in the ancient world, the idea of science, philosophy, and religion were not separate items. There was one common endeavor that you could say, as Bob mentioned, is characterized by what we call the spiritual path. So all of these perspectives we're talking about in this lecture series are perspectives on the same thing. And that same thing, if you were forced to define it, you could call it perhaps the search for truth. And it's important to remember that the very term philosophy, philosophia, which was coined by Pythagoras, of course, we often translate that as love of wisdom, but that may not be quite adequate. Maybe it would be better to think of it as love and wisdom. Maybe we could even take the word love and use the Buddhist term, compassion. Philosophia is therefore compassion and wisdom together. And you get the idea of the caduceus with the twinned serpents spinning their way up to the top, and the dome with wings is perhaps truth. And wisdom and compassion are necessary for the elevation of the soul. So with philosophy, it's really important to remember that it doesn't exclude the heart. It's really important to remember that the elevation of our feelings and of the heart are equally important with the elevation of our thoughts and ideas. So one can't really pursue the truth. One can't really pursue wisdom without love, without a passion, a driving force. And we think about individuals that have a great love for their sport, for their instrument, for their family. They pour themselves into it. They commit their lives to it in toto. And this is the kind of idea that's pointed to, I believe, by Pythagoras when he mentioned, he put those two terms together, philosophia. So now to get into some prepared remarks that I have for everybody, I want to start with a story. And this story comes from the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, and it goes like this. Formerly in Tibet, there was a famous Lama called Dram. One day, Dram saw a man walking around a reliquary. Walking around a reliquary is good, he said, but practice is even better. The man thought, well, then reading a holy book would be good. He did so, and one day, while he was reading, Dram saw him and said, reading a holy book is good, but practice is even better. The man thought, this also does not seem to be sufficient. Now, if I do some meditation, that will certainly be practice. Dram saw him in meditation and said, meditation is good, but practice is even better. The man was amazed and asked, how does one practice? Dram answered, do not be attached to this life. Cause your mind to become the practices. Dram said this because practice depends on thought. Now, practice for Dram is the process of reorienting one's thinking and feeling. It is a training of the mind and heart to function on a higher plane. The mind must become more universal, the heart more compassionate. There's no limit to perfecting these qualities. They are infinite, hence the philosophy of perfectibility. This requires a radical reorientation for the disciple. Philosophically, it is the gradual detachment of identification from the persona, the mask, the identification with name and form, and the training of the mind to function from an ever more universal standpoint. It is a gradual withdrawal from attraction to pleasure and the fear of pain, which is refocused on the nobility of duty and service for one's fellow man. Each human being, from the standpoint of the immortal soul, is born to fulfill some group of duties on behalf of those around him. It is a long transition from selfish to altruistic motivation. There is no formula for this. There is no panacea. The individual must untie their own knots. The web of self is millions of years old. One must become the great sifter, as the voice of the silence advocates, and extract the germ from the chaff. No one can do this for us. We must do it for ourselves. Theosophy, the philosophy of perfectibility, requires a recognition and a negation of what is temporal and ephemeral. This requires perspective. We must look within and discover what is blocking our path, what is holding us back. This centripetal activity must be counterbalanced with an affirmation of what is permanent and eternal. We know this is exceedingly hard, and one knows hardly where to start. So we start by expanding, by looking beyond. Emerson said, "The life of man is a self-evolving circle, which from a ring imperceptibly small, rushes on all sides outwards to new and larger circles, and that without end." This is the opposing side of the dialectic. The effort to join one's heart to the hearts of one's fellow man, the quest to feel the great heart of humanity, is the centrifugal practice that must be combined with negation. Meditation, centrifugal, and self-study, centripetal. Transcending the personal self through meditation, correcting the imperfections of the personality through self-study. The student needs both. We are told that one reaches a point where the machinations of the desire mind, a mind captured by desires, becomes amusing and even funny from the standpoint of the observing, detached individuality. For most of us beginners, it does not seem so funny. In fact, it feels more irritating and agonizing to have revealed before the observer's gaze the tentacles of selfishness, the chains of self-concern that we have wrapped ourselves around. But when we see people like the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, full of joy and laughter about the human condition, you cannot help but feel that there's hope for all of us. What we can learn from them is to stop taking ourselves so damn seriously. Mold the clay. Don't curse at it because it's not perfect. Progress in the philosophy of perfectibility is advanced by practice. This is true in athletics. It's true in music. Remember those three brilliant musicians at the beginning of our program talking to each other through their guitars as if it was some sort of Indian raga. It's a good example of this enormous amount of practice manifesting. And it's true in all the arts and sciences. And it's true in the development of all human skills. Why would it be any different in the most profound human challenge of them all, self-realization? Krishna in the Bhagavad Purana tells Uddhava, the wise exalt themselves by self-endeavor. Dhram recognized that spinning the prayer wheel, reading sacred texts, and even meditation, all worthwhile endeavors, mind you, are all secondary to the practice of assuming the mental posture of the immortal soul. And this is done gradually and incrementally so that one grows as a tree grows, ring by ring, cell by cell, fiber by fiber. So if we maintain the intensity of practice and persist under stress, which were steps 5 and 6 in Pierre's presentation when he gave us 7 disciplines for the student to consider. We are eventually afforded a glimpse, however small. We gain a fleeting taste of the soma juice of a higher life. Whether it be a moment of profound joy for accomplishing something difficult or enduring some challenge, a brief glimpse of the pathos of the human condition, a witnessing of the sweetness of a young child, or a moment of overwhelming gratitude towards one's parents or grandparents, are enough to spur one on, to encourage us to keep climbing. It is enough to sustain the quest of perfectibility, wherein one day these fleeting experiences may become more frequent and come to dominate our existence and inspire us to be the best version of who we really are. And what is the message of the sages and mystics who have mastered this mighty art of yoga? They tell us that this sovereign position of mind and heart is akin to being filled with light. Enlightened means the conjunction of manas and buddhi, wisdom and compassion, fused together with courage, which is why L. Frank Baum in The Wizard of Oz had Dorothy accompanied on her journey back home by the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, all of whom were in search of the attainment of wisdom, compassion, and courage. And much to their surprise, was already hidden within them and revealed by practice. So what if we are miles away from any form of enlightenment? So what if life has tossed us against the wall and thrown us to the ground? So what if we have made every mistake under the sun and fallen into every trap and were diverted by countless temptations? Perfectibility means we must keep starting over. If our hold over our mind is weak, so be it. Keep trying. Every day is a new incarnation, we are told by the wise ones. We can use our imagination to contemplate the portrait of the sage, the Mahatma, a wise being. The Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, the Sermon on the Mount, the Tao Te Ching, all offer portraits for contemplation. Add your own imagination. Think it through yourself. Write your own portrait of a sage. The Irish mystic George William Russell, A.E., said, "We have imagined ourselves into this pitiful dream of life. By imagination and will, we re-enter true being, becoming what we conceive of. On that path, the fiery brooding I entered." Thought precedes action. Spirit informs substance. We become what we think. The philosophy of perfectibility, which is Raja Yoga by another name, demands the perfecting of our thought process, the purification of our motives, and the sifting of the heart doctrine. And if we persist, as the great English poet Shelley would say, to hope till hope creates from its own wreck the thing it contemplates. The teachers of the philosophy of perfectibility tell us, try, ever keep trying. Realization comes from dwelling on the thing to be realized. In other words, practice, practice, practice. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they say, take it till you make it. Sure, you don't feel calm, kind, or together. In fact, you actually feel anxious, agitated, and forlorn, defeated perhaps. And we all, short of enlightenment, have some form of addiction we are fighting, whether we are aware of it or not. So Alcoholics Anonymous encourages the practice of imagining being calm, kind, and together. Do it for the sake of the people around you, At first, you won't feel at all calm, kind, or together while fighting the addiction, not in the least. But you really don't want to drag others down into those feelings. Keep imagining feeling a way, this new way, until it is no longer pretending. Eventually, you will actually start to feel differently. Fake it till you make it, they say. And why does this work? What is actually happening is the training of elementals. That is the alchemical process we've undertaken. The philosophy of perfectibility is a very practical path. From this vantage point, one is forced to concede the theosophical admonition that the whole of life is a practice. The philosophy of perfectibility infers that man, qua man, is a chooser. Man is ultimately the captain of his own ship, the pilot of her own vessel. In every waking moment, whether eating, bathing, working, reading, writing, talking, thinking, writing, watching, driving, cooking, cleaning, teaching, learning, singing, playing, or listening, we are practicing something. Every waking moment, we are impressing life atoms, points of life. And whatever impression we make, it creates a tendency to repeat the impression again and again. Mr. Judge called this the cyclic return of impressions. If you are irritated while being stuck in traffic, you are practicing irritation. If you are frustrated by the news in today's paper, you are practicing frustration. If you are angry with a pushy boss at work, you are practicing being angry. If you zone out watching television after a busy day, you're practicing zoning out. And we'll get better at zoning out the more you do it, just like any other skill. Lincoln made the observation that human beings are just about as happy as they make themselves out to be, which leads one to wonder, why is it that human beings are so adept at making themselves miserable? Our lives are filled with unhealthy practices, negative meditations, and obsessive compulsions. The philosophy of perfectibility suggests that we sort this out, think it through, and establish new practices. Stuck in traffic? Practice patience. Frustrated by news? Practice compassion. Angered by the teacup tyrant at work? Practice forbearance. All three of these circumstances, as uncomfortable and painful as they may be, are opportunities to practice virtues and qualities that belong to the immortal soul. These are qualities that will undoubtedly be needed to fulfill some more strenuous duty in the future. We may not have control over all of our circumstances in our lives. They've been determined by choices made earlier in life and in past lives. But we do have full control over our responses to them. This was the revelation that Viktor Frankl made in the Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. And if he found meaningful ways of responding to the brutality of a concentration camp, we ought to be able to fare with what life throws at us as well. Remember, Jesus said, "No man is given a burden greater than he can bear." Any mental practice which any human being can begin at any time and at any place and at any stage of life concerning the practice of imagining oneself as an immortal soul is extremely hard to sustain. Extremely hard. Let's not fool ourselves. Let us appreciate the magnitude of the task before us. Let us not fall victim in the cynical times that we live in, that any panacea, ritual, routine, dietary change, memorization of text, perusal of books, attending of lectures, participation in study groups, and the like can substitute for the actual discipline of practicing the mental posture of the immortal soul. There are no shortcuts and cheap solutions in the spiritual life in regards to human perfectibility. And it is precisely because of this point that it is an endeavor with so much nobility. We can measure our progress in this regard by the degree to which we see others in our lives as immortal souls too. You cannot do the one without the other. So let me leave you with a passage from our dear friend B.P. Wadia, who talks about this vantage point of the immortal soul. The student of the secret doctrine has to undertake the practice of this yoga, this union with the divine. There is no one within whose reach the beginnings of this higher life do not lie. Theosophy is for all, but everyone must want it for themselves. Therefore, it is only for those who want it. The proportion as each wants it, he takes it, and in that measure gains the clear vision of a true understanding and the unmistakable realization of the unknowable self. Very different from the so-called yoga practices in this simple life, which is strenuous, this hourly living, which is heroic. And what is it? When we see the matrix of the pralaic space in the bed in which our body sleeps, on waking, recognize its potency to refresh and build that body. When we see the water with which we bathe the body as the purifying nature with which consciousness rejuvenates itself, when in every morsel of food eaten, every drop of water drunk, every breath of air inhaled, every affection absorbed, every word of knowledge assimilated, we see the mighty magic of Prakriti, strong to devour as to regenerate. When in every idea put forth, in every word spoken, in every love given, and in every deed done, we see the creative power of consciousness. When in every child we see the divine babe, in every woman, Devaki, the mother of Krishna, in every father, the mighty Prajapati, in every faithful wife, the peerless Sita. When in every melody we hear the music of Orpheus, and in every movement perceive the grace of the Theosophy. When in every enlightened mind we see Hermes, in every virile body, Heracles, and in every Nara, man, Narayana, God, aye, even in the sick and the infirm, that which is named Narayana, the God who elevates through illness. When in our every virtue we see the incarnation of Vishnu, and in every vice that of Ravana, and in every overcoming and change that of Shiva, then do we raise the self by the self unto the self. Thank you very much.